Welcome to EPG Pathshala, Manjusha, Department of Public Administration, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra. Today we will be introducing the students to the concept of zero-based budgeting. Students, to start with, ZBB is a budgeting technique. In ZBB, every item or every scheme should be reviewed critically and started from zero before it is included in the budget. It involves a total re-examination of all schemes afresh, that is from zero level. This system was developed by Peter Ferrara in 1969. Later, he wrote a book on zero-based budgeting process. It was introduced in USA by President Jimmy Carter in 1978. In India, ZBB was introduced in Department of Science and Technology in 1983 and other ministries in 1986 and 87. Though it has been said that E. Hilton in 1924 talked about this concept. He was of the view that dead activities are being fed while alive activities are hungry. As I've already said, there is a re-examination of all the schemes. What I really wanted to tell you, the students, that is, we have to start all over again. Not only we have to start all over again, it needs a complete rethinking. It needs a complete redirecting. We have to cut up from the past. We have to start from the present. Every item of expenditure needs a new look. Students, let's have an insight into the brief history of ZBB. ZBB gives an impression that taxes and spending will be more accurately checked because it is used as an instrument of budget, with the help of which the budget figures of a selected year are considered to be starting from zero. The concept of ZBB is easy to understand and identify changes in quantitative data. It is a concept which remained under criticism due to difference of opinion of exact in government bodies in different nations across the world. Despite that, the concept of ZBB has got prominence and the emergence as well as implementation of the concept in practical sense. In the government, it can be traced back to 1970 when US President Jimmy Carter used the concept of zero-based budgeting while releasing the federal budget for the first time. In this respect, it could be called as a reform in budgetary system. In the present era of inconsistency in the economic system, it is quite a useful instrument as it has the feature of considering quantitative data of the current year's revenue as the base from zero level of the index and to find out the fluctuation taking place in the data. Owing to this reason, the changes are recorded and understood more conveniently. All index bases of the revenue or the expenditure cannot be easily understood to determine the trend of the budget as it reflects a multiplier effect of the change in quantitative data. It is also influenced by the discounting factor which is not known while examining such data. In order to avoid such fallacies, ZBB is useful. According to the concept, after a little time interval, the previous figures of the quantitative data are changed into zero base so as to determine the pace of change from the time period. This helps to limit the hike in figure to a specified level, and when it crosses the limit again, the next current period is taken as a zero base. Thus, it is quite useful for determining the budget. Now we'll get into the meaning of zero-based budgeting. ZBB is a technique of budgeting. Represents the quantitative data of revenue and expenditure. The quantitative changes in the revenue and expenditure take place at a very high level because of influence of cost and market changes. In the long run, such a high change indicates a multiplier budget figures which is not easy to understand and interpret due to a number of factors affect such figures. After a specified time interval, the current figures are converted into zero base and the changes of the succeeding years are taken into account on the basis of such zero-based figures. Zero-based budgeting is entirely different from traditional budgeting because the former is in the process of recording the quantitative changes taken from a decided timing index, while the later considers the quantitative figures of the revenue of the recent past years on the basis to determine the addition made on such figures. It results in recording little fluctuations of the quantitative data in a specified short time interval and is quite easy and effective technique. Regarding the definition of zero-based budgeting, as said by Sarent, define it as it is technique which complements and links to existing planning, budgeting and review processes. It identifies alternative and efficient method of utilizing limited resources and is a flexible management approach which provides a credible rationale for the reallocating resources by focusing on a systematic review and justification of funding and performance level of the current program. It can be stated that zero-based budgeting is a budgeting method where every expenditure must be justified in every budget cycle or in a short time interval. Thus, the budget process of indicating the quantitative data starts from zero. The detailed plan of the funds required for the program is made along with the identification of the benefits due to allocation of funds for each purpose or programs. Now we'll talk about the components of public sector ZBB. There are mainly three components which make up a public sector zero-based budgeting. First of all, we'll have to identify the funding level of decision units. There can only be three funding levels in this case. One is the zero-based level, second is the current level, and then the third one is the enhanced level. After deciding the funding levels, we have to determine the impact of these funding levels, that is the zero-based level, current level and the enhanced level on the programs of the decision unit for which the budget is prepared. Then when we have already have the funding levels, we have determined the impact of the funding level. The third point which needs importance is that we have to rank the decision packages for these three funding levels. That is the zero level, the current funding level and the enhanced level. Before we really talk about the steps in zero-based budgeting, it is essential to have a look into the distinction between traditional budgeting and zero-based budgeting. Regarding the distinction between the both, we can have the following points into consideration. First of all, it's the definition which makes a difference between or distinction between zero-based budgeting and traditional budgeting. In case of definition, we can say that traditional budgeting, the index of quantitative data of the long past is taken as the base. While in case of zero-based budgeting, it considered the quantitative data of the budget cycle at zero level. Then the second important point which needs attention in this case is the focus. Focus of traditional budgeting is on increase or decrease of the expenditure, while in case of zero-based budgeting, the focus is on cost-benefit analysis. Then the third point relates to the emphasis. Determining the trend of increase or decrease emphasizes mainly to depict how much. While in case of zero-based budgeting, it is concerned with the cost and benefit. Why there is need to increase or decrease. Why there is need to spend any money at all. Then there is the fourth point in this case will be the communication. While in case of traditional budgeting, it is always saying that communication is usually vertical. While in case of zero-based budgeting, it is vertical and horizontal both. Last but not the least is the approach. The approach is to take past for granted in case of traditional budgeting. While in case of zero-based budgeting, the quantitative data of past is questioned on the ground that why these activities should be taken into consideration. Students, now we'll be talking about the steps involved in zero-based budgeting. Following are the steps which are involved in zero-based budgeting. The first step is we have to determine the objectives. Zero-based budgeting is to achieve the objectives of cost-benefit. In this regard, while initiating to the zero-based budgeting, the first step is to determine the objectives which include measures and the alternatives to reduce the component-wise cost. Based on such alternatives, the need of the zero-based budgeting quantitative data is picked. The second step, after determining the objectives, the second step will be the extent of coverage. Based upon the budget need in terms of cost-benefit analysis, the next step is to identify the extent of coverage of zero-based budgeting, which is related to identify those areas where there is need to determine the implementation of zero-based budgeting. After deciding the extent of coverage, the third step is develop the decision units. Decision units refers to the department, area, activity or program which is or are identified for ZBB. The criteria for identification of such decision unit is to know about the impact of the alternative as per cost-benefit analysis. It can be stated that for the convenience in understanding and analysis of the cost-benefit according to the alternative expenditure measures, the ZBB is implemented only on the selective decision units. Then, after developing the decision units, the need is to develop the decision packages. The step regarding developing the decision packages in ZBB process is of key relevance. Such a decision is quite relevant for the selection of decision units, which gives the freedom to come out with the alternative to achieve. Last but not the least is the preparation of budget. Based upon the above steps. As I have said, determining the objectives, then extent of coverage, developing the decision units, developing the decision packages. Now is the turn to prepare the zero-based budget. That is the preparation of zero-based budget. That is the last step to prepare the budget for the selected decision units based upon the maximum cost benefit of the alternative chosen. After knowing the steps related to zero-based budgeting, now it's turn to know about the benefits related to zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting is a dynamic concept of the budgetary decision. It is advantageous in terms of accuracy, efficiency, budgetary inflation, coordination, and in other so many ways. The advantages of zero-based budgeting are: number one, accuracy, as I have already said, accuracy. Zero-based budgeting makes every department re-look, rethink of each and every item of cash flow and computes operation cost. It differs from the regular method of budgeting, as later involves just making some arbitrary changes to the previous year budget, which is not the basis of the zero-based budgeting. In this way, zero-based budgeting is more accurate, and to some extent it helps in cost reduction also. It also gives a clear picture of the cost against the desired performance. After accuracy, efficiency is one of the benefits which can be drawn from ZBP. ZBP is not at all based upon the historical numbers, and as such, it helps in efficient allocation of the resources to all the departments. It is the concept which is based upon the actual numbers. Then, reduction in redundant activities. Yes, zero-based budgeting leads to the identification of the opportunities and more cost-effective ways of doing things by keeping all unproductive, redundant things as well as the activities aside. Hence, it is a technique which reduces all such redundant activities. Then, budget inflation. Zero-based budgeting overcomes the weaknesses of incremental budgeting, of the budget inflation, as it justifies each and every budget line or action. Thus, it is instrumental in terms of overcoming the inflation. Coordination and communication. It is also helpful in terms of improving coordination and communication within the departments. It is useful to motivate employees by encouraging them through better coordination and cooperation. And it involves their contribution in decision making. Now, we'll be talking about the limitations of zero-based budgeting. Apart from above mentioned advantages of zero-based budgeting, it has certain limitations also. First of all, it is very time consuming. Zero-based budgeting is a very intensive activity, as it requires the involvement of the concerned organization, company or government to indulge in preparing the budget in a short time interval on the basis of quantitative figures of the recent past. Thus, it takes time to do all such activities afresh. It is therefore not like that of a regular budget which is prepared on the basis of past data on uniform basis. require huge manpower. Zero-based budgeting is a comprehensive and time-consuming activity. It requires the involvement of large number of personnels. It is a hurdle for implementation to such organizations which do not have adequate number of employees and are unable to provide the requisite number of human force for the purpose of implementation of zero-based budgeting. Then there is a need for experience also. The lack of experience is also one of the limitation of zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting refers to the exploration of cost in every line of action, which requires experienced executives who have to deal or involved in the process of applying it. Most of the time, the executives do not possess such experience due to the absence of required training packages for them. It is a limitation to effectively implement or apply it in the real perspective. So, lastly, we'll say that on the basis of the advantages and the disadvantages of ZBB, it is quite evident that zero-based budgeting is the most effective update technique of budgeting, which, taken into account the internal as well as external changes recording at the time of applying budget. It is useful to identify the changes in cost and all time of action with more efficiency and is useful to motivate employees. It is also worth to discuss that this technique helps to overcome the inflationary movements and is relevant in all respect despite of the certain disadvantages which can be removed, keeping in view the importance of ZBB. So lastly, we can say the managers will have to justify why they have to spend any money at all. So ZBB is of the concept that it says there is a need to rethink, there is a need to relook, there is a need to cut the past. We have to start from the present and the base year taken should be 0. Thank you.